Okay, and with that being said, since our numbers are stabilizing a little bit, I'm handing the floor over to Catherine and Ayumide, who will be moderating our forum for today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine, and I'm going to be one of your open forum panelists. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. I'll let Ayumide introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Ayumide Ajukaye, and I am also one of your open forum moderators for today. I'm very excited. Kind of echoing what Rita said, my favorite SDG is SDG 4, though I also believe in SDG 5 as well. And I'm very excited to help lead this discussion today. And so I first off want to thank all of our panelists who have joined us today, and we'll be reading off their bios and kind of explaining them to all of you, and then we'll start going into some questions. So Catherine, if you want to go with the first bio.
Yes. Gary Nimbocker is a 16-year-old advocate for youth well-being and global health, entrepreneur, singer, and a student from Bangalore, India. In 2020, she founded the Association for Youth Wellbeing, or the YWB. By advocating for equal healthcare facilities and closing the gender gap, she contributes to her passion for educating the overall well-being of underprivileged young people. Currently, she works with activists, young people, and UN agencies to educate young girls and disadvantaged youth about intersectional approach to well-being. The work she is doing is truly remarkable. So we're very excited to have you here. Our next panelist is Salem AlNukta, is from Syria, but currently lives in the Netherlands. She speaks on various topics from women's engagement and economic prosperity to empowering young people with technology as tools for change and innovation. As founder and CEO of Changemakers, Salem looks for and establishes meaningful partnerships with like-minded organizations with the same mission, oversees operations, and ensures professional representation of the youth-led initiative at global conferences. Additionally, Salem is a member of the Youth Task Force established by the UN Women and a Gender Innovation Agora established by the UN Women Arab States and featured on Forbes, Wamanda, the government of the Netherlands national website, and much more.
And I'll be explaining our next two panelists, Ms. Deborah Thome, who is a visiting scholar at the Institute of Latin American Studies in Columbia University, and she has a PhD in political science in the Universidade Federal Fluminense in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and she's currently studying how institutions shape women's representation in politics. Beyond her research, she also fights for women's rights in Brazil, speaks in various conferences about feminism, and organizes cultural activities and pro-abortion advocacy groups. Thome has also trained more than 300 women from all over Brazil, is planning to run for office in a Brazilian government agency for a women's policy program. And additionally, she is the author of several children's books which depict Brazilian women leaders. And finally, our last panelist is Miss Olalua Abogun, who is she describes herself as an unapologetic feminist and is also a vocal advocate for girls' rights in Africa. She is the founder of the Girl Pride Circle, which is a Nigerian-based nonprofit initiative which aims to advocate for girls' rights and empower girls. At 13, Ms. Abogun served for 4 years as a child senator in the Nigerian Children's Parliament, which allowed her to begin engaging in child's rights advocacy work. And she also volunteered for 2 years with the talent management unit at AIECC in Nigeria and Panama. Later, she became a 2014 finalist in the Africa Youth Day essay competition hosted by the African Union Commission. Ms. Abogun hopes to empower other young girls to tell their stories and advocate for their rights to help realize the potential of Nigerian girls. So thank you, all four of you, for being here in this panel. We are so excited to get into these questions. First off, if anyone wants to give any opening remarks and introduce themselves, we're here to listen. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to see the full room. Thank you very much, Ayumide, for your kind introduction. I just wanted to say that, gender equality is a topic that is really close to my heart, that I always love to chat about. I never get tired of talking about gender equality. And I really look forward to the conversations with the other amazing panelists today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. Does anyone
Hello,
else?
everyone. Yeah. Hello, everyone. It's also wonderful to be here, and especially to know that it's a very young audience. So I think it's the main reason we're also very excited, and of course it's a Sunday afternoon. So it's a beautiful energy to kick off the week.
Hi everyone. I want to say thank you also to the invitation to be here. It's an honor to be discussing with so many different women from so many different countries in the world. And what I want to point out to kick off something is that I'm very happy that we different women are sitting together to thinking about gender issues, because I think feminism isn't the kind of difficult right now to understand how we can organize this feminism with so many different women. And I'm so happy that we are trying to do it right now. And so many young people are trying to find this new common agenda. And I'm very happy to help and to listen to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this, especially because I'm always excited to talk in a room full of diverse young people, and I'm looking at a lot of diverse different backgrounds here. So I'm very excited, and I can't wait to listen to everyone's opinions. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, for your opening remarks. We'll be getting into the first questions, but yes, I want to acknowledge thank you also to everyone who is here in this room, who's listening and paying attention to this conversation. This is really important for us to talk about gender equality and, learn more from these amazing panelists. So with that, I'm going to go into the first question, and feel free to just kind of give, 3-minute responses to this. But the first question is, what is your definition of inclusion in leadership, and what does meaningful participation of female leaders look like in society? If anyone wants to answer.
Okay, I can go first. Oh, I just saw you on mute, so please go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Ayumide. And I think that's a really critical question in the times that we find ourselves. So for me, I would say that inclusion in leadership really is being quite intentional about lowering barriers, right? In leadership, in systems of power, on decision-making tables. I think that it's being intentional about creating space for people who are, routinely excluded from such decision-making spaces. So for instance, when we talk about political leadership, we know that routinely women have been excluded from political leadership in a lot of our countries. No country has actually been able to achieve parity in all aspects of political leadership. We have a few countries who continue to, set the pace, like Rwanda, for instance, but still there's a lot of work to be done for us to actually get parity in political leadership and even other forms of leadership like corporate leadership. So being inclusive is really looking at the systems. We know that some people have been excluded on the basis of gender, on the basis of race, class, ability, really looking at how we can use policies, how we can ensure norm change to ensure that people from all of these backgrounds, people in all their diversity, can lead and can occupy leadership position. When we talk about meaningful participation of women in leadership, I envision a society where we can acknowledge, first of all, that women can lead. You know, we know that there's a sort of unwritten norm in many of our contexts that leadership is for a particular gender alone, particularly from the context where I come from, the sub-Saharan African context. Men are usually designated traditionally as the leaders, right? So a society that acknowledges that leadership is a phenomenon that everyone can reflect regardless of their gender, and ensuring that there's norm change. Everyone, right from childhood, right from early childhood to adolescence to adulthood, everyone can actually partake in that norm change of, you know, acknowledging and recognizing that women and girls can also be leaders. So I feel like this society that I envision is going to be a long time coming. We're progressing really slowly, but I really believe in this society, and I believe that young people, our voices, it's really critical for us to continue to speak up to achieve this society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ola. To pass it off, we would like Ms. Nukta to speak. Thank you.
Okay. I was trying to look for an analogy to leadership inclusivity, and I actually found a nice one. Imagine how would you like your fruit basket to look like? Everyone wants their fruit basket to be very colorful, very diverse, all colors, all shapes, and they even want to add more. You never want to take off something, but you always want to add more to it. So in a very simple analogy, inclusive diversity is actually seeking to have the most colorful and diverse fruit basket. But in other official terms or formal terms, it's our abilities as leaders to actively seek and embrace different views and perspectives. And instead of just accepting them when they come to you, you actually go out and invite them. So it's a very strong leadership tool that unleashes individuals' hidden skills and ideas, leading to a collective, powerful community. And then when we speak about meaningful participation, we don't only consider the level of freedom that people have to actually express their point of views. We actually want them to be empowered and enabled to take actions afterwards to fulfill their visions. So it's not only, so actually having or seeking people to be free and express their point of views freely is only the first step in meaningful participation, because then we want them to be able and empowered to take actions. And then I'll pass it over to the next speaker.
Thank you. Ms. Thome?
Oh, hi. I think it's maybe because I'm, from my point of political science, scientist, I'm always thinking about women and representation in terms of the political power. And I think it's very important to think, when we think about this inclusiveness in representation, how much we miss when we don't have women there. And I think it's the problem for most of our countries. Brazil, it's a huge problem in the Brazilian politics. We are one of the worst countries in women political representation. And mostly when we talk about, I'm trying to find, because in Brazil, we use a different word for Afro-Brazilians. We don't use it in Brazil, but just to say Afro-Brazilians, women Afro-Brazilian women are the biggest demographic group that we have in the country, and they have the worst representation in the country. So we don't have so a big proportion of the society being represented in political terms. And so when I think about leadership, I'm always thinking in the end in political leadership, and women in places that they can represent another women. They can bring their agendas. They can be their voices in the Congress or whatever. And I think when we think about leadership and inclusiveness, we have to think in leadership most of the time that we have to think it to be a leader, to help other women, to help other women from our group. I don't think it has any reason that we want to be leaders just because we want to be leaders. Sometimes I teach for a course for public servants, and I used to say that it's a leadership course for women public servants. And sometimes they come and say, oh, I want to be the boss. I want to be the leader in this service I'm doing. And I say, why do you want to be the leader? You have to be the leader if you have the willing to help other women, to transform their lives, to do public policies that can help them. So I think when we think about inclusiveness, we have to think how to put different women in this position of power that they can effectively change the world. I mean, change the country or change the world. We have to know why we have these women there, and they have to do a job to transform. I think we have to think about this two issues.
Thank you so much for the three of you, first off, for acknowledging the importance of action, of voice, and of diversity in leadership, of affirming the rights of all women, not just women who happen to be privileged in whatever society we're talking about, but just the importance of acknowledging the diversity within women and how women should also support other women. Ms. Nimbocker, do you have any other things you want to add to that?
Of course, I think I completely agree with everything that everyone has said so far, especially with Ms. Thome, when you said, why do you want to be a woman leader? Is it just for the title, or is it because you want to help other women? I think especially coming from this adolescent girl leader background, after working with the different members of different UN entities, one thing that I really realized was that there is no point in me just having this position alone with one more person from my country, because I'm still contributing to UN Women as a girl leader, as an adolescent girl leader. And along with me, I think from my region, there's just one more adolescent girl leader. And I was having a conversation with her the other day, and we were just thinking, what is the point of just the two of us being in this position, while we can still, when we're in this position to, and we have the ability to bring in more adolescents and more girl leaders, and we know so many of them, and we know that they have the ability to actually create that impact. What can we do to bring in that space and make it more inclusive and diverse, especially for adolescents under the age of 18? We are very rarely taken seriously at global platforms. We are usually put in, as some of the people senior to me sometimes say, you're at the advocacy table, but not at the decision-making table. But why not? Because I strongly believe that young people's decisions must be made by them, for them, and there cannot be decisions for us without us. We are capable of co-leading and co-learning and co-creating processes. And there is no point in just saying, you are the kids, so just sit down and we'll do it for you. What we really want to see and what we really need to see is that we need to have young people at the table co-creating and co-leading. We don't want you to just give us the space completely. We want to create it with you. We want to build an understanding with you. We want to advocate. And that is what young people want to see. So I think that is what inclusive leadership means to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that was a really great point you added about the importance of young people in these conversations, especially considering most of the people listening here are young people. Thank you for bringing that up and for affirming that for everyone. So, Catherine, if you want to move on to the next question, but before then, I've dropped it in the chat. If anyone has questions for the panelists, please ask them. We will be periodically bringing these questions up to you all. So if anyone has any questions as this conversation is going, please feel free to ask. Now I'll pass it on to Catherine.
Yes, before I say the first question, I just wanted to thank all the panelists for their amazing response to the first question. It was very inspirational, especially for all the youth here. I hope that all the youth can go home in this call, can go home and kind of make a difference within their own communities to help female leaders. The second question is, how has the pandemic exposed these systemic issues? Do you think it was a good or bad thing? So if any, yes, Ms. Thome.
Okay, I can go if we, but if anyone wants to jump in, please go ahead. Just to begin, I was thinking about this question, and maybe one thing that we have to consider, it's not the level of the leadership. I mean, because when you think about leadership, of course, the pandemic has a lot of problems when we're thinking about women who are already in leadership. But we have to think not these women that are in the top, but let's think about the women who are in the bottom. And I want to point out, considering the SDG 5, I think we have to take into account how these women were disempowered. Now she has these women from the bottom, the school women, the migrant women, women who are in Brazil. We have a high number of women who work as I completely forgot the word. It's people who works from home, domestic workers. Yeah, domestic workers. We have a huge proportion of women who works as domestic workers, paid domestic workers, and the pandemic puts so many problems for these women who has no job anymore, who in many of the time they are the breadwinner of their own home. And I think we have to think how much impact the pandemic, we still don't know how much impact the pandemic has had with the life of these women, because they are in a very poor situation right now. They don't have jobs. And how can we talk with them about empowerment when they don't have even, for example, food to eat, when they don't have school for the children, or they don't have. So I think the pandemic put in our lives a problem so huge that we have to deal in the next few years. Thinking about public policy, thinking about all the stuff. And I think this is important. This is when I arrive to talk about women leaders. Because when we think about women leaders, these women leaders, they have to look to these women, the women from the bottom. And I repeat here, migrants, poor women, single mothers, and all these groups that they are now completely vulnerable. They were before vulnerable, but with the pandemic, they are now even more vulnerable. And so I think to talk about empowerment with these women right now, we have to put food in their houses. We don't have, we cannot talk right now about empowerment in the sense of leadership or something. We have to think about these women and how to help them, constructing with them a different future and less vulnerable future.
Thank you so much. I'll pass it off to Ms. Ola for to respond to this question.
Yes, I think all what Deborah said are like really important, and just to add to that and bounce off of those thoughts, my own context in Nigeria, looking at the experience of the pandemic, particularly during the lockdowns, I could see that the perspectives of women and girls were really lacking from the interventions that government rolled out to respond to the pandemic. So for instance, we had lockdown for weeks where people couldn't go to work, people couldn't go to school. Women couldn't access some critical services. So for instance, women who were pregnant couldn't access maternal health services. They couldn't just walk into the hospitals because COVID cases were being prioritized. And that was really risky for a lot of women, particularly young women who had unplanned pregnancies around that time. We saw sexual and gender-based violence skyrocketing during the pandemic as well. That was a gendered impact of the pandemic that we saw, particularly during the lockdowns where people did not have access to the usual support systems that they could run to. And we could see that even though access to food, other kinds of services were regarded as emergency services, it took a while before sexual and gender-based violence responders could get the government to make sexual and gender-based violence an emergency service, to spell it out that people who needed this service could go out of their houses without being arrested by the police. And even in the police, within police stations, women said they went to the police stations to report domestic violence cases, but they could not find police officers there because some of the police officers who were supposed to be receiving these reports were sent to enforce COVID curfews. So you see that because we have a typically male-dominated political system and political leadership, we see that perspective of women lacking from the policies that COVID sort of made it necessary for us to put in place. And women and girls were on the receiving end, the negative receiving end of the impact of these policies. And I would say that it's a good thing because throughout my advocacy career and my engagement with government, I don't think there's any level of advocacy that we could have done to show that this is what the impact of lacking women's voices in leadership, this is what it looks like. Because women will always have a perspective that people of other genders would not have because of our unique experiences and the unique challenges that we face, both biological, both socioeconomic. And so I think that this really brought to the fore how we should be thinking about including women's voices in leadership. We know that is a fundamental right for people to be represented, for people to have their full human rights. That includes the right to, be represented in leadership. But we also know that including women, particularly young women in leadership, gives us perspectives that nobody else can replace. And that's a fact that COVID really brought to the fore.
Thank you so much. Ms. Salem, I'll pass it over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a question that I always get and I always read about. So, what's the impact of COVID-19 on our life aspects? It's just like Ms. Thome and Ms. Abagun mentioned, we can't really determine the definite impact of COVID-19 on our lives. And we have seen that the impact took many turns and many shapes. So for some people, it brought relatively good impact on their professional life. So for example, think of people who feel more comfortable working at home and have less social interaction, but also think of those people who really thrive in social events and networking and all of these environments. It's very hard to generalize the effect and limit it to one single word or give a definite description to how COVID-19 contributed to gender equality. However, it definitely exacerbated on the existing inequalities one way or another. So for example, working from home, let's say, If a woman has kids, and there's she's working, and for example her husband is working, for some families actually the woman had to quit her job because the man's job was weighted higher than hers. So she actually had to quit to take care of the kids, to take care of chores, and allow the man a quieter and more peaceful environment to work at. In other contexts, some women had to even work harder, additional hours, day and night, so that she can still grasp or still prove herself noticed in the work environment, where everyone is also trying to prove themselves at a distance. So these are the differences. And then I think, although it's a very important question to always ask how COVID-19, how other events impact our lives, it's very important to focus on the root causes and the root issues that we have, and instead of focusing or distracting ourselves too much with the events that are happening on the side. So the right thing to do is continuing to address these inequalities as root issues, and instead of always or continuously try to report on these side events. I'll pass it over to one of the panelists or to one of the moderators.
Yes, so I see your question, Pakshi. We'll answer your questions after we finish this question. So I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Nimbocker.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And I think just talking about the impact of COVID-19 on gender disparities, personally, I think that these issues and challenges concerning gender equality have always been existent in the global South, especially. But from what I've seen, it has become more and more prominent during the pandemic. And mainly because I think the only positive part is, as Ola said earlier, that it gives us a chance to, look at the situation in a better way. Because I've also observed that because of the pandemic, these issues and disparities have been growing significantly. And because of that, we have been able to have a better look at it. But I think, except for that, most of it is the negative part, especially when I've observed in my country, India, most of the families were lost their jobs. They were not able to afford food or living. And when such a situation occurred, what we saw was that if a family had to choose between providing an education to their girl child or providing an education to their boy child, then they would choose the boy instead of the girl. If they had to prioritize, they would not choose their girl child. They would not prioritize their girl child. They would not prioritize sending her to school. They would not prioritize her healthcare or her menstrual hygiene over other things in their lives. And I think that that's mainly a huge challenge that we've been seeing during this pandemic, which I'm sure was existent before the pandemic as well. But it has definitely been growing during the pandemic. But also, as Salem said earlier, for some women, it has been convenient working from home. And that being said, it's also important for us to keep in mind that I've definitely seen this situation where women have been working overtime or have been taking care of all the chores at home and are stressing out about being silent or keeping a calm environment for their male counterparts to work at home. So that is something that I've also observed. But yeah, definitely, I think I agree with everything else that everyone else has said. Over to one of the moderators.
Thank you so much for all of your guys' well thought out responses. We did have a couple of questions, so we'll take those now. For the one in the chat, I'm just going to read it out and the panelists can go ahead and answer it. What can I do as a man to amplify the call for gender equality in my society? I live in Nigeria, a country where boys and men are given more opportunities and relevance than girls and women. So if any of the panelists would like to answer that.
Yeah, thank you for that brilliant question, Ayo. So as a man, as a young man living in Nigeria, you can be an ally for advocating for women and girls' rights. And being an ally simply means using your power, right, to affect sustainable changes and to bring about gender equality from the smallest sphere of influence, right from your family to your educational spaces, to work. I think there's always an opportunity to be a great ally and to speak up against inequalities, against discrimination, being that voice that reminds people that girls' and women's rights are human rights is more than enough to be an ally. Always calling out discrimination, even within your family when it happens. It's in the small things, right? And I believe in small waves of impact to go towards the big goal that we're looking towards. So I think that it's not an easy journey, really, to try to be that voice that questions the norm, that tries to set new standards for equality, for respect for women and girls. But we have to start somewhere. And I have great examples, so many examples of young men in Nigeria who are using their power to sort of question these gender norms. For example, there's Mr. Ayumide in Nigeria who runs the Boys to Men project. He uses this project to share knowledge and information with young men and boys across Nigeria to change their mindset around what it means to be a man and to promote positive masculinity. That's another way to be an ally, to have those conversations with other young men in your society, in your community. And I think that's a really great way to go to be an ally for gender equality.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ola, for that response. Does Ms. Thome or Ms. Nimbocker or Ms. Nukta have a, yes, Ms. Nukta.
I have something, very quick to add. I think as a man, just like Ms. Abigail mentioned, sometimes if at least you have greater access to opportunities, just like you mentioned, it's always good to actually refer your sister, your girl neighbor, your female friend to these opportunities. If they hadn't had access to them, then please mention them next to them. If it's unsafe for them, for example, to go to a center or something because of male power or other security reasons, then try to take the time to walk them there. So be there when they need this kind of help, and be open to actually offer this kind of help. I think one of the main things that the world generally struggles with is actually women's access to opportunities. So for example, girls might not have same access to, for example, web pages as male because of different interests, some different Facebook algorithms, for example. So the suggestions girls sometimes get are different than what males get. So every time, be the voice of the opportunity. So just spread this opportunity, spread the word, and I think this is one very simple way to help.
Thank you so much. Ms. Thome, were you about to speak?
Yeah, no, just a quick add something. I'm sorry, just to add something. I think both my colleagues have great answers. I think it's the movement now. I was reading the instructions for example, for the movement he for she. They are now new instructions. What we are thinking now, it's how we can change the structures, how we can change the norms. So what I invite the young boys who are here and probably maybe will be leaders in a few years, quite a few years, in 5 years, 10 years, I don't know, is to pay attention of women, of vulnerable women. and to don't forget that they have this responsibility with the society, with the whole society. I think it's very important to focus on this kind of need. We have to change the norms. We have to do, I think it's, of course, it's very important, and we must do it in our own homes, in our communities, but it's also important that to change the rules. We have to have more fair rules, equal opportunities for women and boys, for girls and boys, women and men. And I think it's important that we try to touch our leaders, our male leaders, to make this change. I think it's kind of I start to think like when we think about ecology, when we think about the climate change and all the stuff, we have to invite all of us. I mean, like, we have to invite men also to work thinking about a better society. It's not just a work for people who lives in forest to fight for climate change. It's a fight for all of us. So I think it's the same. And just to take the opportunity of concerning this answer, I would tell something that I forgot that I think it's important. When we think about the SDG 5, it's a transversal SDG. So I think it's interesting to think how it's important to think in gender in each one of the 17 SDGs, because I think this is a characteristic really strong in the SDG 5, is that it has to be thinking in all the changes that we want to do in the next few years. So thanks.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Nimbocker?
Thank you so much. I think to answer that question, I would just like to talk to you about what I would want my friends who are boys to do to advocate, because I'm assuming that you're a young person. So I would honestly want the boys in my class, or the boys who are slightly elder to me, to advocate for the things that I am advocating for. I remember once I asked the boys in my class why they were making insensitive comments about a girl, and I was really affected by that. So I went ahead and asked them, why do you not believe in gender equality? Or do you even know what gender equality is? And I was being very polite about it. And I remember that the few of the boys in my class said, because that has to do with feminism, and it literally has the term feminism in it, and we're masculine. And I was like, okay, so this is a big problem. So I think one thing that I would definitely want them to do, and I'm assuming that I'd want all young boys to do and young men to do, is to educate yourself about gender equality, read more about it, and be aware of gender justice, be aware of the disparities. I want you to stand in the shoes of a young girl or a woman who is vulnerable currently and think, what are the rights that you think you deserve? And how would you want to change that? And what would you want to do to advocate for those changes? And that's something that I told them that day. I'm not sure if they understood what I said, but I went ahead and said it anyway. And another thing that I suppose you could do coming from a country like Nigeria is that definitely speak to girls around you, speak to women around you, and try to understand their situation. Because coming from your background, but a different gender, I'm sure that they have different experiences. And I'm sure that if they're comfortable to share it with you, you can learn more about their situation and probably talk to boys of your age or boys around you, just in your friend circle, and then talk about how you can change that, how you can change those disparities in your local communities. Because as much as global impact matters, I think grassroots organizations and grassroots impact is still a huge factor when it comes to closing these gaps in gender equality. And I hope that answered your question.
Thank you for the amazing responses to that question. And thank you for those who asked questions in the chat. I'll let Ayumide ask the next question.
Yes, so to kind of close things off before, if we before we kind of end these things, we wanted to ask kind of what is your advice for the next generation of female leaders? One person, Pakshi, had a question which they directed to me about relating to this conversation about how boys can advocate for gender equality. And I think this kind of generally relates to how can young people advocate for gender equality. So I would love to throw this out for any panelists to start. Maybe we can start with Ms. Thome.
Hi. I'm sorry. There's two questions. The first one is about the advices for youngest. Is this one?
Young people, yes.
Young people. Okay. So I think maybe I'm the oldest here. And I have one advice that many of you, as I can see, I'm so impressed by so many things and so incredible thoughts you are giving to us this morning. In Brazil, it's not morning, it's afternoon, but okay. But I have some advices. And one advice is to structure your demands. I think it's great. I love to go to the streets. I love to do demonstrations, but you have to structure your demands. So if you have demands for more education, write it. Try to find other older women who has already worked with education. Maybe you have different women, maybe you think differently from them, but they have already experienced some challenge that you are dealing with. And so it's a strong suggestion that I have to read the ones who came before. Try to read, and read, I mean, in a broader sense. Try to talk to them. Try to understand how they fight for equality in other times and how they could have their winnings or not, how they were defeated in their intentions, and try to impact governments. Because I really trust that in the end, when we impact governments, the civil society organized impact governments, it's when we have a more structured change. We have change that will last for some years at least. So I think it's really important that you structure and try to find the channels. Because, and I don't know in other countries, but sometimes to be a representative, you have to be like 18 years old or 21. It's still young. So try to elect one representative from your group. Try to put them there. Try to ask them to do things. So this is something that it's my advice for young feminists and or young women who are trying to advocate for the women's rights. And so this is I think really important. It's to structure, try to impact the rules, try to change the world. I think it's also go to the streets. The streets gave us energy. The streets is this moment when we feel like we have people working with us. We have another women and we're fighting for the same cause. But you have also to think more, organizing your thoughts, organizing your demands, and thinking about public policies who can help women in a medium and long term.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thome. Ms. Abogun, do you have a response to that?
Yes, so my final words, I have three final pieces of advice, if you could call it that. So first of all, I would say to all young people, particularly young women leaders, I think you should get comfortable with being unpopular, because asking for gender equality, fighting for gender equality, we're upsetting a system that has existed for centuries, and there are people who are benefiting from this system. So of course, nobody's going to hand it to us on a platter. It's going to be a lot of struggle, because what I can learn from my own journey of youth organizing is that many people often burn out. We burn out because we're tired, we're just fed up because we're not getting the results that we want to see. But I think that we should get comfortable with that and be in this journey for the long haul. Another thing that is really related to that is caring for ourselves. Many times we're focused on advocacy, we're focused on social change, achieving the SDGs, that we forget to step back and fill our cup. So you can't pour from an empty cup, right? Which means that your cup has to be full before you can give out. Advocacy takes a lot from you. Leadership takes a lot from you. And you have to be intentional about how you care for yourself, keeping your mental health in check, having a community, even if it's an informal community of peer mentors who can encourage you, who can keep you going. It's really, really important as young leaders. And then finally, I would say look inwards. Look inwards every time. Check your individual privilege. Check that you're not being co-opted by the very system that you're trying to fight. Because a lot of times, we young leaders who often have our voices heard, we're often in the spotlight, we sometimes forget that we have certain privileges that we need to check. So who are you speaking for? Are you creating spaces for other young people, particularly young women and girls, those who don't look like you, those who don't sound like you, who don't have the same educational privilege as you do, who don't have the same exposure to all of these brilliant platforms? How are you creating spaces for them? How are you reaching back? How are you mentoring with the little capacity within your power? How are you using that? How are you using your power? Because at the end of the day, we all have power. Even as young people, we do have some degree of power. And we need to be conscious about how we use this power and how to ensure that we're not becoming the system that we're trying to fight.
Thank you so much for that response. Ms. Nukta, do you have something you want to add to that?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I have two pieces of advice. The first one is actually what we started the session with. So seek to become an inclusive leader. And that means seek to ask more questions, seek to answer questions, even if they were not asked, actually, by the way. I'm someone who always like to get to know more cultures, as simple as, why do you do this? What's the background of this event, and so on. So ask these kind of questions. These will help you to understand the person next to you, and then by understanding the person next to you, you will build your sympathy with an entire community. And then you will learn to actually be more accepting of differences and so don't be afraid of what's different or what's unknown. Everything starts as different. Everything starts unknown until we unpackage it. So until we get to know what's under the surface. Embrace all challenges as learning opportunities, of course. And then the second thing, do not overthink being a female leader. And instead, aspire to be a leader, just a leader. The world wanted you to actually think that being a female leader is harder or more difficult and more challenging than just being a leader. Being a leader alone is a challenging job. So do not add the word female to it, because it's not true. Focus on your own skills and your vision, the vision that how you envision the world to become when you become that leader, and instead of focusing on your own gender. These are my pieces of advice, and I'll hand it over to one of the moderators.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And then finally, Ms. Nimbocker, do you have any advice for anyone here?
Thank you. I think firstly, I just want to say that I think I'm the youngest on this panel. So I was just very happy to get all of these amazing pieces of advice from the other three panelists, because I think I myself have a long way to go. And I've just started out a few years ago. So thank you so much. I will keep all of those points in mind during my journey as an advocate for gender equality and all of its intersections. But I think I'm not yet qualified to give you my pieces of advice. But I would say that my message to any young person who is like me, who wants to make impact, who wants to create substantial and positive impact, is that firstly, do not give up, because I do understand that while you're a young person working towards creating a gender equal space, something that can get really hard is that you can get overwhelmed. One, because a lot of people can tell you that you're so young, and some might tell you that you're too young to create impact. Some might praise you so much that you get so overwhelmed and you don't know how to react to it. And sometimes you don't know how to manage it with your schoolwork or your university, or if you have any other thing to do. So how do you balance that along with your advocacy work, right? So I think for me personally, I had a hard time figuring out how to not get overwhelmed. And I was someone who always wanted to make the most of every opportunity that came to me. Every single invite that came to me, I would never turn it down, because I thought, I need to take this opportunity to create a more gender equal space. I need to do whatever I can. And that eventually led me slowly to burn myself out at a point of time. And as an advocate for well-being and mental health, I think I strongly believe that you need to keep in mind that as long as you are not mentally stable and as long as you're not taking care of yourself, it is very hard and almost close to impossible to making other people feel well about themselves. You need to take care of yourself first. So I think that's something that I've learned significantly, that to take care of my mental health as well as others, but first putting myself first and my well-being as well. And then one more thing that I just wanted to say was that you don't have to stop because someone told you that you're not good enough, or you don't have to start because someone told you that you need to start right now. There's always this one time that you feel like it's the right time to start your advocacy journey, or there is always this one moment that you feel like you're ready to create that impact, and you're not obliged to do that right now. What you can do, and what you must do, according to me, what every person should do, is to stand up against these disparities. Do what you can and what is in your control. But if you really want to voice out your opinions, then that's up to you on when you want to start. And you don't have to do it if you're not comfortable doing it. And one more thing is that you need to learn about it before you just start your advocacy journey. Because I've seen a lot of young people who just found out about a lot of the gender disparities, and they're like, oh, okay, I need to create an impact. And then they realize that there's so much more to it than just the surface level, and then they dig more into it, and then again, as I said, it gets overwhelming to learn about all of these different issues and intersections, that it's just not gender equality. It may be connected to well-being, modern slavery, and so many other things that you probably haven't even heard of in the past. So reading more about it, learning more about it, and as Ms. Thome said earlier, talking to experts in the field and learning from people who have been more experienced than you definitely helps. And as I said before, just don't give up. Take rest, take a pause, maybe pause for a while and take a break, but just don't keep giving up as an option. You can create an impact. Just tell yourself that you are able to do it, and I think that's all that matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we are at the top of the hour. Thank you to the four of our panelists for being here. It was very inspirational, even just for me, just listening, and all of what everyone said was very inspiring. So I'm going to pass it on to Catherine right now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you to all of our amazing panelists. It's so great to have such a diverse panel of amazing people who gave such amazing advice and thoughts on this topic. Rita is going to go ahead and take a photo of everybody. So if everyone could turn on their cameras, and so we can get a photo of this forum.
Yes, please turn on your cameras and we will be taking a picture. I'm going to give you a minute for that.
While everyone turns on their camera, I do want to thank our four panelists. Ola and I actually go back to our days when I was running events in Qatar. And so it's nice to see both the familiar faces and also young and new faces, and particularly from our youth advocate from India, Gari. Thank you so much, and I appreciate all the guys in the room as well. So thank you for being here. And before we take our photo, and please do turn on your camera, I want to remind you that next weekend we have 2 days of further discussions. We'll be doing another forum panel discussion on women in STEM. And we will also be opening registration for Global Week of Action for March, which is focused on SDG 3 with a focus on mental health. So with that, thank you to our organizers, Rita and Ayumide and Catherine for this. And if you turn on your camera, we will take a group photo. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, taking 3, 2, 1, and okay, done. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. And also, if the panelists want to leave their emails in the chat, that would be much appreciated. I know some other people had questions, so that if you all are comfortable with that, sending those in the chat. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I believe Ola has a social media handle for her org. So if you have any other information you want to drop in the chat, we'll be doing that. Also, our community magazine will be highlighting this forum next month. So if you're not signed up for that, make sure that you are, and it'll be another opportunity to get the contact information from our speakers. So thank you very much. I think we had students from 20 countries logged in today. So again, just a day in the life of COVID, right? Here we are all on Zoom. It's been pretty horrific, but this is one of the good things that has come of it. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day, great evening for those of you who've stayed up late. And to my team, I will catch up with you guys later. Great job. And thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much for having us.
Thank
This
you.
is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, so while everyone leaves, so Ayumide and Catherine, really, really nice job. And thank you for checking the chat. So by the end of it, you guys were doing a really great job passing the baton and like kind of prepping which speaker was going to come up next. And can I say this in this room? Yes, I'll go ahead and say it. The other thing is you had 4 female speakers who were really good at